For now, we will switch gears and talk a little bit of football, Muso, because we are getting closer and closer to football season. Lots of items of interest, specifically in the NFL this season, and there's going to be lots of new faces in new places, right? Both in terms of free agents that are with new teams and the rookie class. So I thought for today we can go over a few potential props for the 2022 rookie class and see if any of these are intriguing. I will ask you to keep in mind that last season, three rookie receivers topped 1,000 receiving yards in the NFL. That was Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, and Jalen Waddle. A receiver that might be a little underrated coming into this year with the Dolphins getting Tyreek Hill as well. But teams these days not afraid to feature a first-year player.
That's for sure. And there's a couple teams on this list who are going to need to feature a first-year player.
Yes, there are, and we will get into those teams. But first, I thought we'd start with the local team here, the New Orleans Saints, because when they drafted Chris Olave out of Ohio State, I was really pumped up. I think Sean Payton in recent years kind of had a bad habit to try to kind of save money or save value on the field, I should say, by maybe prioritizing other positions. But the Saints did prioritize receiver, not just in the draft, but in this offseason in general. They go and add Jarvis Landry in free agency, and then they draft Chris Olave. And when you look at Olave's receiving props ahead of his rookie year, at least from DraftKings, they seem to have a lot of faith in the Saints rookie receiver to produce because his receiving yards total is at 719.5, over odds minus 125, under odds minus 105. And then the touchdown prop for Chris Olave is set at over under 4.5 touchdowns, over minus 130, the under plus 100. And I think when it comes to the Saints, Olave is a player that's ready to play in the NFL immediately. You saw what he did at Ohio State last season, but the Saints do kind of have a lot of mouths to feed, right? Michael Thomas coming back, Jarvis Landry. I think a guy like Marquez Callaway, who contributed a lot last year, is a little underrated. And when it comes to this prop, I can maybe be talked into the touchdown prop, but I might be leaning under on the yards because 719.5, even for a rookie in Chris Olave that might be ready for the NFL game, does seem kind of high, especially when you consider the rest of the Saints depth chart.
So this was really interesting, right? Because, man, how much of a 180, a complete 180, did we do from last offseason talking about Saints receivers to this offseason talking about Saints receivers? Yet there's still a lot of unknown and still a lot of question marks, it feels, right? On the surface, I don't disagree with you there. You look at 719.5 receiving yards over under for Chris Olave, and you think, okay, Michael Thomas is there. You have Jarvis Landry there as well. Two veteran players who you would think are going to be the number one, the number two targets, and Olave's there at number three. Then you factor in somebody like Adam Troutman, potentially, as a tight end in the receiving game. You factor in a guy like Alvin Kamara, who we don't know what's going to happen there yet with the suspension. It's possible that he's out there week one playing. Well, if he is, you know he's going to get a lot of touches in the passing game out of the backfield as well.
Taysom at receiver more, too.
Taysom at receiver more as well. You even have a Marquez Callaway potentially as a number 4, Deontay Hardy. Like, there are a lot of mouths to feed, as you said, and you feel a lot better about the group as a whole, but there's still so many question marks. One of those is, which Michael Thomas do you get? I mean, he looks great right now, obviously running and sprinting, but he's not out there. He wasn't out there, during mini camp or whatnot. That's okay. That's the right play, obviously. You want to have him for training camp, and I wouldn't even be surprised if they don't even maybe even play him in preseason games. Just let him go through training camp and whatnot. But it's real easy to fall into a trap and expect the Michael Thomas who set the receptions record in the NFL, right? And that might not exactly be the Michael Thomas you get, at least early in this year. Does Chris Olave step up potentially there? So I do see an avenue for it. I would lean under just because of everyone else that gets involved in the passing game in New Orleans, not just the wide receivers, like an Adam Troutman, like an Alvin Kamara, or whoever is at running back. If Kamara is suspended, Mark Ingram or Tony Jones Jr. or whatnot. The touchdown prop, though, as you mentioned, that is one that is very, very interesting. I know, I think it opened at 3.5, you said?
Mm-hmm.
You obviously like that more than 4.5, but could he get 5 touchdowns? Absolutely. And here's one reason why. He's a game breaker. Chris Olave at Ohio State showed time and time again that he can take the top off of a defense and go 70 yards to the house on one play.
Man, they had so many receivers sit out the bowl game, and Ohio State still put up numbers. They're going to be really good this year. But that's a conversation for another day. And we talk college. Let's keep it in the NFL here, and let's keep it in the NFC South, because another rookie with a really high receiving yards total is Drake London out of USC, the first-round pick for the Falcons. His total for receiving yards set at 764.5, and his touchdown prop is the same as Chris Olave's, over under 4.5 touchdowns. And this is a guy that, similar to Olave, I think physically is capable of producing right away, but you have to look at his team situation. There's going to be more opportunities for Drake London to eat in terms of people taking targets away from him, but they got Marcus Mariota at quarterback, and statistically, he hasn't really fed individual receivers very much, at least not in terms of betting fantasy football, because Marcus Mariota has never had a 1,000-yard receiver. The top wide receivers in Marcus Mariota-led offenses have earned 549, 945, 837, and 891 yards respectively. Pretty modest there. I think London maybe does have a chance of becoming the number one receiver in this offense. It will be hard to surpass Kyle Pitts, but even if he does, they have Kyle Pitts at wide receiver, but not much else. Cordarrelle Patterson had a really good season last year, but we'll see how much he has left here in his older age. Zaccheaus is a player that scored 2 touchdowns against the Saints in that game, but had 3 the rest of the season. They lost Russell Gage to the Buccaneers, and I kind of like the over when it comes to his yards, just because the Falcons will have to pass a lot, and the touchdown prop becomes interesting as well. So I think that given who the Falcons have right here, it will be easy for him to get this prop, or it will be attainable. But Marcus Mariota is also a quarterback, and that does give me a little bit of pause.
So if I'm looking at this one, I think the value is on the receiving yards at minus 115. I mean, touchdown prop's already up to minus 140. It would stand to reason he does probably get 5 touchdowns at least in his rookie year. The yards is interesting, and you touched on a couple of things that I think make it interesting. Number one is the total yards for a receiver, the leading receiver under Marcus Mariota in his career. You went through the 4 guys there. 3 of those 4 are over this yardage prop. So, I mean, it's not like, oh, he's never had a 1,000-yard receiver, but it's not like his leading receiver has always been at 549 yards, right? I mean, he got close with a 945, 891, and that would be over the 764.5. The question comes in kind of also what you alluded to is London the guy, or is Kyle Pitts the guy? If Kyle Pitts is the guy who's been in the league already 1 year, been in the Falcons offense already 1 year, if that's the guy they trust more and look to more, potentially he's the 945 guy under Marcus Mariota, and maybe Drake London is the 549. They will be behind in games a lot, like you said. This one's really interesting. I don't hate the over here, but I think you could very well be in for a sweat if you do take Drake London over 764.5 receiving yards as a rookie. He's more than capable. I mean, you got to remember, Drake London, for the longest time, was projected to be the first wide receiver taken in this draft. That ultimately was Garrett Wilson. The New York Jets took him, but London was that guy coveted by many early on in the draft process. So he's more than capable. I lean over here, but I think you could probably be in for a pretty big sweat with it just because of factors like Kyle Pitts, like Marcus Mariota, like the Falcons being absolutely terrible.
Well said. I agree that the Falcons will be absolutely terrible, but when it comes to props, receiving yards, fantasy, I think Drake London can be very valuable.
But Drake London is one of those guys we talked about kind of at the top of the segment who is a rookie that's going to have to be featured for his team.
Yes, and on a bad team, that's an advantage. I think had Elijah Moore for the Jets stayed healthy last year, he could have pushed 1,000 yards. He ended with 581.
It's also worth noting the secondaries that he's going to have to go up against just within his own division. Like having to go up against the Saints secondary twice is going to be tough. Having to go up against the Buccaneers secondary twice, that's going to take targets and yards away from you. I mean, okay, maybe you're not guarded by Marshawn Lattimore, but you're going to be guarded by Bradley Roby or Paul Adebo, or maybe even Alontae Taylor, who you heard a lot about all of a sudden since he's been drafted. You look at the same thing with Tampa Bay. So that's something to factor in with Drake London as well.
That's a good point. They do have some good secondaries in the NFC South. And I alluded to the Jets a moment ago. Speaking of Ohio State wide receivers, here's another one. And here's one that was drafted ahead of Chris Olave. Garrett Wilson. His receiving yard total is set at 749.5, over under 3.5 touchdowns. And if you saw Garrett Wilson at Ohio State, you know that he's a beast. similar to Olave, right? Senior season, 1,000 yards, 12 plus touchdowns. But the Jets actually, believe it or not, Musso, I know this from watching them because I had Elijah Moore in fantasy last year. They actually have a pretty decent wide receiver room. Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Braxton Berrios, a fantasy football darling towards the end of last season. And they also added Breece Hall at running back out of Ohio State, if that does anything for you. But when it comes to this prop, you're still relying on Wilson, who's a young quarterback. Offensive line has a lot of questions there. I might be a little bit higher on the Jets, honestly, when it comes to their win total than a lot of people are. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit more on Wednesday. But given the circumstances, I do kind of like under 749.5 receiving yards for Garrett Wilson, and over under 3.5 touchdowns is kind of a toss-up for me.
Crowded receiving room. Jury's still out on Zach Wilson after 1 year, right? I mean, that's fair. Probably just a stay away spot for me, in all honesty, because I really don't know what to make of the Jets offense right now. I know you just mentioned you might be higher on the win total than some. And on paper, I mean, they have a lot of young, talented guys offensively. I mean, Zach Wilson is young and very, very talented. Elijah Moore, you just mentioned, I mean, the guy's young and very, very talented. Breece Hall, who they just drafted, who was one of the best running backs in college the past 2 seasons, is very talented. But it's young, it's unproven, probably just a complete wash and stay away spot for me there.
Like I said, I kind of like the under just because I'm higher on some of the Jets receivers. I like Elijah Moore. I like Braxton Berrios. Corey Davis maybe got a little bit more money than he deserved coming to New York, but I could see him have a bounce back year as well. So I do kind of like the under there for Garrett Wilson. And this last one is really interesting. Another SEC receiver, Treylon Burks on the Tennessee Titans. His receiving total is set at 869.5 yards, over under 5.5 touchdowns. And honestly, again, when it comes to win total, like record prediction, I think the Titans are going to be worse this year. And when it comes to complimentary receivers for Treylon Burks, really all you have is an aging Robert Woods to throw the ball to. And clearly they have really high hopes for Treylon Burks after they traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles, but he is going to be under immense pressure to perform, to put up these stats. And he has Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback, which I do not feel very great about. That's just a big number, and I would go under for Treylon Burks.
He's the other one who has to perform, the other rookie receiver who has to perform for his team. You mentioned an aging Robert Woods. How about an aging, recovering Robert Woods as well? Like the guy's coming off of a knee injury. What are you going to get from him? You have Derrick Henry obviously in the backfield, and he'll do his normal thing. Maybe he takes a little bit of a step back. I don't know. I mean, he got nicked up as well, but he'll do his things. He'll get the lion's share of the reps. He'll be the focal point of that offense. 869.5 feels like a lot for Treylon Burks, given the pressure and whatnot. If I had to pick, I would go under, but I would also probably just stay away because there is a route that he goes over just because he kind of is the only option. So I could see both. If I had a lean, it'd be under, but again, probably just a stay away spot for me. If the Tennessee Titans want to succeed at the level that they have the past few years, they're going to need Treylon Burks to fill the shoes of A.J. Brown rather quickly.
Yes, and that might not be the best formula for winning. And when it comes to fantasy football, honestly, as of now, I don't know that there's anybody on the Titans that I trust right now not named Derrick Henry. So a few interesting questions to answer in Tennessee this year.
I'm still just very surprised they made that trade. I'm still kind of surprised at that.
A.J. Brown wanted out. You could tell by his tweets, too, recently. He was not happy with whatever was going on in Tennessee.
I don't blame him, but that was definitely one of the more shocking draft day trades for sure.
I'm with you.